We're at Autobahn Country Club in Joliet, Illinois to look at three cars that most people can probably afford. The 86 TRD, the S2000 AP2, and the Miata Club. Let's take a look at all the things that make these cars great on track and on the street, and some technical information. The interior space of three simplistic driver-focused cars. We first have the S2000. It's the oldest. This is the most pure design, while still maintaining good design quality or feel. The door cards still have a little bit of a pocket, yet you're only going to fit a phone or a wallet in there. The panels and the plastic feel good, soft to the touch, including the armrest and the leather. The center design of the dashboard, again, is low glare materials. It is only for the driver. This car is basically a driver functional car. The passenger you can forget about. But it's amazing to see something that is so focused on great physical controls that have held up even 20 years later, that feel like it's something out of a modern car. Everything has a great clicky feel to it. It's easy to figure out and use. And they hide the CD player or the radio, whatever you want to call it, so you're not distracted by anything except the drive. The gauge cluster is a throwback to the 90s Formula One car that McLaren Honda did that Ayrton Senna used to drive. Everything else feels tight. The shifter is the only thing here. You get the cup holder covered up. The purposefulness of the S2000 is quite unmatched in sports car history, with the exception of possibly a Lotus Elise or Exige. But let's get on to the 86 FRS or BRZ. Now, the 86 twins have a huge advantage over something like the S2000. You have usable back seats. You have a trunk with fold down rear seats that you could fit 4 wheels and tires in. The fact that you can use that car year around, and it's more functional for a taller, bigger person because you have a telescopic steering wheel that moves in and out and up and down. The S2000 did not have that. You had a fixed wheel, which meant it is handicapping for someone that is taller, bigger, and I hear big people talk about, oh, I squeeze my way in, and if you love the car enough, you will. But the BRZ in 86 is by far the most usable everyday car, and while it might have some performance deficiencies, it makes up for it in usability, and it maintains that driver focus that the S2000 had. Low glare materials, functional controls, you are not overwhelmed with a ton of technology or gimmicks in the car, and while it may look cheaper, it certainly is definitely one of the more pure cars on the market. Last but not least is the ND Miata. ND1 and ND2 share the same smallish cabin that feels like it was more developed for the Asian market than the American or North American market. It feels smaller than the S2000, while ergonomically the arguments could be made that certain things are better because the steering wheel adjusts, the column adjusts, so you can have a little bit more flexibility. It has a usable audio system, including speakers in the headrest that make Bluetooth calls or phone calls completely functional, even with the top down. The manual top you can put down and up so fast that it makes you wonder why there's a mechanical top that even exists, or an electronic top. Door usability and storage areas are just as pathetic, if not more pathetic, than the S2000. The cup holders have to be snapped in the back, which get in the way of your arm. The door and side pockets near the center tunnel are also not good. But the overall simplicity of design, the lightweight design, low glare dashboard, smallish dashboard, makes it for a purposeful driving experience. Now, all three cars have a manual transmission, and each one of them feel great when you get past some of the mechanical issues with each one of these cars. It's more about what type of person you are in terms of body type and mentality that will help you decide or choose which car is the best for you. Now, before we take a drive in each one of these cars to talk about their street and track manners, we need to bring each of them into the shop to talk about their technical proficiencies and deficiencies. Welcome to the underbody segment on three affordable, exciting cars that have been out for quite a long time. First, the S2000, then the 86 BRZ, which is on the very last iteration for 2020, 2021, and the ND2 Miata, which is the freshest of the three.
And we've done videos on all these cars, which I'm sure we're going to bring up a lot in this video, but this is actually how we met Mark. One of the first videos we did together was a S2000 86 comparison.
Which was horrible. You can skip that.
Yeah, it was real bad.
But I did do two S2000 videos that are modern. One, a review video, which covers everything, and a buyer's guide that's an hour long. I cover every single thing about this car. So if you want to learn about it, watch those. But let's hit the bullet points, Jack.
Yep, this is a 4-cylinder rear-wheel drive car that was designed in the mid-90s.
Correct. And this was the going away project for Uehara-san, Shigeru Uehara. He did the original NSX, and he did this. And this was supposed to be that no compromise or less compromised driver's car, that they didn't care so much about refinement or interior appointments and room and all that stuff, kind of like the NSX had to be. So what you get here is a vehicle that has all the beautiful things about peak Honda design. Naturally aspirated motor, manual transmission that's still one of the best ever made. And let's talk about some of the brief changes. So in 2000 to 2003, we had the AP1 that had a 2-liter naturally aspirated motor that had a 9,000 RPM redline. Then you went to the AP2, which started in 2004 and 2005. Then the AP 2.5 was 2006 onward, and that got drive-by-wire and stability or traction control.
And the AP1, AP2 probably had the biggest character jump though for the car, correct?
It did. So the AP1 was, again, more raw. It was more edgy. It had the bump steer issues in the back. You know, you had to control it more. It revved higher, but it didn't have as much torque. So the American market got the 2.2 liter for 2004, while the Japanese market maintained the 2 liter. And, you know, they refined this and refined it over the period of the life cycle. And almost every single year, which most people don't know, they changed little things like damping and spring rates changed almost every year. So they were constantly toying with this. But the biggest complaint from the purists was the original was the most hardcore, the 2000 model. And then the CR kind of combined, which was the club racer, the last model year, which was like the going away party car. That combined a lot of the things from the AP1 and the AP2 into the best thing that they could do. So you buy this car now, not because it's readily accessible. You buy it because it's one of the most connected, easily rotatable, and good driving tools pretty much created. It is so fun to drive, which we'll talk about, but they accomplished that by making the body extremely rigid for the time period. Now, when you look at this, it's kind of laughable. There is no aero.
It's all steel.
It's all steel. There's no aluminum, and they did that to keep costs down. Unlike the 86 and, of course, the ND2 Miata, you see plastic covers. This is just littered with what looks like just raw parts thrown in here, and that's partly why this car has not the greatest aero. It's unbalanced aerodynamically at higher speeds, which aids in its ability to kind of feel unstable. So most of the aftermarket deals with kind of putting
big wings, splitters, all that other fun stuff.
Holes in the bumper, all that stuff. I mean, but as a stock car, you know,
it's double wishbone.
Correct. In-wheel double wishbone in the front and the rear.
Very balanced, and we'll throw up the weight chart. I mean, from your perspective, Mark, as we're going to try to rush through this a little bit, what's your favorite model year, and what are the problems that people experience with these cars?
So the AP1s, the 2000 to 2002s, definitely had more finicky diffs and transmissions. They changed the synchros for the AP2s, which made them more durable. They felt better. They all have the same kind of like notchiness issues. But the diff was improved for basically the AP2 generation is what you want for durability, but people still loved like the higher revving part of it. If I was going to keep one long term and drive it a lot, the AP2 is kind of the gold standard. But the problem between the 2004 and 5s, where it was still drive by cable, it had a throttle cable, so tuning, if you want to go aftermarket tuning, you want to go to AP 2.5 when they went drive by wire because it's just easy to reflash the ECU. But everything on here is adjustable. Camber, caster, and toe. And then in the back, you have camber and toe adjustment just out of the box with eccentric bolts. So if you just want to street drive this thing and take it to the track with some brake pads and sticky tires, it's an amazing tool. And the aftermarket is still great. Like I finally did brakes and tires because I exceeded what this car could do. Brakes, tires, and more adjustable camber. Just, well, of course, the wheels are too wide to fit into the fenders.
And we'll be doing a video that's going to come out shortly on kind of what you have to go through when you modify an S2000 as well.
Correct. And we're going to get some help with that because, you know, I'll talk about my experience with it and then, of course, what everybody else does, which is a totally different story. But as a stock car, you know, this is still relevant today, and that's why it's crazy expensive and so loved that it's still just as relevant, if not more relevant, like than the 86 and, of course, the ND2 Miata.
And this is the only car that currently, out of the three that we're doing, will appreciate.
Yeah, it's a strange world to be in this far away, almost 20 years. So let's get into the next car, the BRZ in 86, Jack.
Sounds good.
Now, you've had a brief look at the S2000. We know what that is and what it's not. Now it's time to look at the 86, which used to be the FRS. This was released in 2013, and it's been slowly evolved to where it is now, and this is kind of the last version of it.
Yes, this is a 2020 86 with the TRD package, which is basically Toyota's solution to all of the car's original deficiencies. So now you have a big brake kit from Brembo, Sachs dampers, sway bars, springs, all that other fun stuff, and Pilot Super Sport tires, or Pilot 4S's now.
So you can no longer slide this around even if you want to, unless you get stupid. It's a totally different feeling car, which if you want to know everything about this, we've already covered it and all the past generation FRS and 86 and all that.
Yeah, we did this exact car earlier this year.
So the main things to talk about, the highlights are, this was built to a price point. And that's why you don't see a lot of the things that you see on the S2000 and the Miata, because they wanted this to be affordable. At the launch price of 25 grand, you can't ask for much more. Limited slip differential. They've added aero panels here to smooth out airflow over the course of the life cycle. The suspension's been improved. They've given the engine a little bit of a few manufacturing changes, including the intake manifold. They just give it a slight bump in horsepower. But other than that, it remains largely unchanged from where it launched. The main thing to talk about here compared to the S2000 and the Miata is it has far superior aero. It just annihilates the S2000 in that you don't have some of the lift issues, you don't have some of the instability issues because you have a coupe. You don't have a convertible top to deal with, and this was designed after that. So a lot of the things that are not there on the S2000 are here. But the negatives are, it's all steel. Again, there's no aluminum underneath. It has a lot of shared components with other Subarus, which is a pro and a con. The pro is it's cheaper to replace. Stamped steel control arms. The steering rack is mounted in a way where you feel something, which you don't feel something on the S2000. It even has better steering feel than the Miata.
Yeah, it's an impressive architecture, but the negative is, because this is a strut front multi-link rear, you have none of the eccentric bolts or really any camber adjustment at all in this architecture. So when you're comparing it to the S2000, which is endlessly adjustable and is honestly probably a more dedicated track car than this is.
Yeah, you have to make a lot of changes here. Not having the ability to be able to adjust camber from the factory or caster like the S2000 and Miata is a huge detractor. So you're basically buying this, and if you're not happy with the way that it is, you're going right to suspension and all the things that go along with that. But, you know, again, there's so many good things about this that we're going to talk about when I do some of the track driving and the drive. I'm so happy that it still exists, and people can afford it.
Lastly, Mark, let's talk about some of the reliability problems with this car. And it being largely steel does mean if you drive it in the winter, which you can do.
Yeah, I did.
It will rot out, and so did I. The other thing to talk about is the motor. It's a 2-liter flat 4. It's a boxer engine. It's fairly stout. They solved most of its problems from 2015, 2016.
Yeah, I think it was about 2016 where everything was kind of sorted out. Last but not least, Jack, the ND2 Miata. And compared to the FRS and the S2000, this looks like something like that.
It feels exotic with all its aluminum, Mark.
Yes, you have aluminum knuckles, you have aluminum control arms in the front, you have double wishbone in the front, multi-link rear. This is a much more purpose-built and developed car. It is not shared with anything else in the Mazda lineup.
And if you want to learn everything there is to know about a Miata, we did a 5-part documentary with the help of Mazda, their engineers, original designers, the janitors who were, who were there in the NA and NB eras. So watch that if you want to learn everything there is. However, this is going to be a quick overview of this car.
So the main thing, you have adjustability in the suspension. In the front, camber, caster, and toe. You have eccentric bushings. In the back, same thing. You have toe adjustment and camber adjustment, which means you can take this right from the street, modify it simply to go to the track with normal stuff. Brake pads, tires, brake fluid, and you can have a lot of fun. And from an engineering perspective, this is the only car from the three that had motorsports built in from the start. And I'm not just saying that because it's a catchy word, because they do have a racing series that the foundation of this car is built on and upgraded. So all of that was baked in the extended development cycle of this car. So you have an in-house manual transmission. All of this was made by Mazda. There was no outsourcing. The S2000 and 86 trans are Aisin units. This is Mazda. You have a Torsen limited slip in this car that's optional. Torsen in the FRS and in the S2000 as well. They're very similar. This has the best weight distribution, 50-50 front, rear, and almost 50-50 cross. But the S2000, well, at least mine, is almost perfect.
Yeah. And
the 86 is very close to this. So we're comparing as much apples to apples here as possible.
And when we're on the track, this is a RF GT model. We will have a club car that is a soft top for our track portion.
Correct.
So Mark, let's talk about the engine and some of the updates. There were two 2-liters for this car with the ND1 and the ND2. And the byproduct of that is the ND2 revs higher and makes more power.
Yes, and the brief story, which we didn't really cover in the documentary, is Mazda of Japan had a developmental budget for this car, which kept stretching and stretching, of course. And their engineers wanted the 1.5 liter to be that global, high-strung kind of motor-sportsy motor. And Mazda of North America, they're like, yeah, we're going to need a bigger one than that. But the problem was there wasn't enough budget to give the 1.5 and the 2-liter the same treatment. So the 1.5 got all the money, and there was nothing left for the 2-liter. So they took the Mazda 3 2-liter and put it in the ND1. And when they got money saved up, or not money saved, but when the budgets were reallocated...
Yeah, they rated the couch cushions and all other fun stuff.
They did the same treatment they did to the 1.5-liter to a modified 2-liter. Better, breathes better, different tuning, revs higher, head work, all of that. So the ND2 is kind of what they originally wanted to do, and this is probably, at this point in time with the economy, as good as we're going to see it. They're going to add G-vectoring to this car. I don't know when, but other than that, there's not tons of plans for it. It's already as great as you can possibly make, like a $30,000+ car.
Yeah, and the 2-liter, the reason they redid that motor and modified it is they wanted it to feel better, not to add more horsepower.
Right.
The horsepower was a byproduct of this thing revving out more. So with that, Mark, what are the reliability concerns with this car?
Really, the main thing is just the manual trans has gone through 4 or 5 revisions now. Long Road Racing, who originally did the Cup Car program, was involved in helping them further develop it, because when you got on track, which they didn't find in their original development
cycle, couldn't factor in the monkey factor.
The monkey mode factor, that people were breaking it, and some of the quality control issues that they had with the manual gearbox. So Mazda was very proactive about modifying it, correcting it, and even now they're going through quality assurance stuff and trying to improve it as time goes on. But none of the models we've driven, and I think we've driven 7 or 8 of these, even on track, I've never had a manual transmission problem.
We pound the hell out of these cars.
Yeah, we do. So again, like every car, they have their issues mechanically, but the Miata is really solid. It really is. People beat the snot out of these, and I can't wait to do that on the track, Jack.
So with that, Mark, let's head to Autobahn Country Club.
Jack decided to start with the oldest first. The S2000 was being developed in the 90s.
Wow.
Why is it still relevant today?
Well, Mark, because it's a simplistic formula and proof that when you get it right and when you realize that driving is about the simple act of driving, meaning you have 3 pedals, good steering, a communicative chassis with direct inputs, it makes the car timeless. It's not about infotainment and screens and 0 to 60 times. It's about an emotional connection with an automobile. And you've owned the 86 like I have, but you've also owned 3 or 4 S2000s at this point.
Yeah.
Why is it you keep coming back?
Well, there's the main thing about this car. I'm going to get into it. I've owned 3 S2000s. I kept completely stock aside from like tires and brake pads. And the best thing about a stock S2000 is there's not quite anything out there that is such a good learning tool about how do I put this? The dynamics of what this car does at the limit is one of the most rewarding cars I've ever driven. I've had an Exige S, I've had an Atom, I've, obviously the 86, and a few other cars that were kind of driver-focused cars. With this, when you brake, when you get deep into the brakes, the car rotates, it always turns in. When you lift off throttle, the nose points in. If you don't have good reaction time and this car starts to snap oversteer, it's not a car that's going to drift easily. It's a car that when the back end breaks loose, you need to be quick, you need to stay ahead of the car. So this is one of the best cars I've ever been in terms of being all completely usable on the street in terms of horsepower. It's not overkill, but every single piece of the dynamics of it are such a joy to drive. And I would take this out of pretty much anything under $100,000 most of the time. And mainly because after all of this time, we know it's one of the most reliable sports cars ever produced. The engine is special, the transmission, the manual transmission is special, but there are a few negatives, Jack.
In the first, let's talk about the engine. So this is the AP2, which means it has a slightly greater displacement and a little bit more torque. But even then, when you leave a corner and you are not higher up in the RPM bands, there is nothing there.
Yes. And you're going to go to a track day or even on the street, and it's really frustrating if you're not understanding what this car is about. And I made a mention on the review I did on this car. If you get out of high horsepower cars and you get in here, you'll seriously think it's broken, because there's just no torque at the bottom end. But once you get out here and you pull one of these, you go down a couple gears, then it starts to make sense.
It is a very rewarding car to wind out, to be fair to it.
It is, but you have to be of the mindset that that's how you have to drive this car. Now, in terms of steering feel, another negative. It's non-existent. This is one of Honda's first EPS units, and short of modifying the hell out of the suspension, it just, it's very numb, and that's probably the biggest negative if I had something.
It is
for this
direct,
car.
though, to be fair to it. It's just, you're right, it's completely numb, and the worst out of the 3 cars here.
Correct.
What else do you want to bring up as far as dynamically compared to the other 2?
I think the biggest thing is, even on a stock suspension, this is a great tool where there is enough suspension compliance for the street. It's a little bit over dampened, but there's not so much wheel travel like the Miata, where you come into a corner and you turn in and you feel like you have to wait for a half a second before the suspension sets. This thing just changes direction. It sets on stock suspension, most really good aftermarket suspensions. It just does everything so well, and the car is so balanced and so rewarding to drive. If you can accept the fact it's not the fastest thing ever, you have to wind the piss out of it, and the aerodynamics, if you're really gonna track this, the aero is so bad, but it's representative of a car from this era that you have to do a lot of work. But I've tried to keep this as close to stock as possible, and also give it kind of the updates that a manufacturer would give it these days. A squared set of tires with real rubber that's not, cheater tires.
Yeah.
A suspension that's better on the street that still gives you trackability, and real brakes. And I think that comes into the last thing, is the brakes on the S2000 are really, really bad. That's probably, if not the steering, the biggest deficiency. They're just old single piston calipers that are even smaller than what came off on an Accord V6 back in the day. It doesn't have ventilated discs in the back. So while they will hold up with a really good set of track pads, you're going to be replacing pads and rotors like every probably 2 or 3 track days, which gets super expensive if you're really good at driving this car.
Which we talked about in the shop segment, specifically with rotors cracking. But at this point, Mark, I think it's time for us to hop into the Miata ND2 Club.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Here we are, the latest and greatest Miata, the ND2 with the RF trim. We also have the Club out here, but we're going to talk about both.
All right.
So we know what's been updated when we talked about it in the shop, but when you get out here and drive this for the first time, you notice right away, why am I leaning into your seat, Jack?
Well, it's because I'm a pretty cozy gentleman, Mark, but it's also because these things have a ton of roll.
Yes.
Even in the Club form, this moves around an unbelievable amount.
Yes.
And unfortunately, because of that, in the corners, when you are going flat out, it does lead to some weight transfer and oversteer moments as well.
Yeah, so basically what you're doing when you're driving this, you're constantly, for me, what I feel like is it's constantly moving around in the back. And it's not that it's out of control, but it's this little dance maneuver, and I constantly have to drive more with my fingertips to feel this and make these subtle corrections. And while it is engaging, it's definitely not slower, and you're fighting for grip. So where does that leave us with the ND? You have one of the best chassis with the most overhead in terms of modification, turning this into something far more. But in terms of stock, they've left a lot off the table to make it, I would say, overly compliant for the street. This thing is really designed to take on some bad pavement. So there's a ton of compression stroke. There's
a lot of wheel travel as well.
There's a lot of wheel travel, so that's great on the street. When you're driving it hard, not so much. So the positive part about that is it does teach you weight balance.
It does.
Pretty much more so than any other rear-wheel drive, fun-to-drive car.
And it's whimsical.
Yes.
The other two cars, specifically the 86 and kind of the S2000 as well, they're not a particularly funny car. They take themselves a little seriously, where the Miata, and it doesn't matter what generation you've been in, they're all kind of funny. And while that doesn't necessarily make it the best car to drive, it is a rewarding experience.
On the street, it's a better car. It's a better car for a couple reasons. One, you feel way more engaged driving it. You can beat it, flog it, and a lot of it is the way the engine's tuned. This makes way more torque. It feels like way more peppy down low, and you notice it instantaneously getting out of the S2000 or the 86. Just revving it out in first and second, there's power the entire way. And then when you're driving it flat out, it still revs, and it doesn't feel like the engine's gonna blow up like the 86 when you're winding it out. So it's free. It gives you this great connected feel, and you can drive it 100% all the time and not get in a lot of trouble, and you have the open air experience.
Yeah,
so,
this motor strikes a balance between the 86 and the S2000. You have the top end of the S2000 where it doesn't feel so labored, and some of the lower end torque of the 86.
Correct.
And this probably has one of the best gearboxes out of all three of them. Yeah, it does have some reliability problems, but I think it's a good balance between the precision.
It's really light,
yeah.
It's really easy to use, and it has the best pedal box if you don't have enormous feet to be able to heel and toe and do all that. All the connections, the driver connections between steering, shifter, brakes, all of that is the best balance in the Miata, where the S2000's under, it doesn't have enough brakes. The steering is kind of dead. The 86 has a really good manual transmission and shifter, but the engine doesn't feel all that engaging. So this does everything basically better than both of those cars. It just has problems, I think, mostly with the body control and the suspension as a stock car. If you want to drive it flat out on a track, you basically have to modify it.
Which you can resolve like you did. I mean, obviously you didn't fix, there weren't the same problems in the S2000, but if you did Öhlins on this car.
Yeah, if you did Öhlins, if you did real dampers of your choice and real tires, it's going to make a huge difference. And A lot of people complain about aero on this. It's aero dirty, it's a convertible. And we understand that the S2000 has the same problems, if not actually worse than this with lift. But I love driving this car. If I had to have an S2000 replacement, it would be this over the 86.
You can actually get these cars.
Yes.
They're readily available and you have dealer support. Finding a clean AP2 or even an AP1 S2000 at this point is extremely difficult.
Yes, and yeah, absolutely. And the fact that this was built and is raced for real,
yes.
Raced for real in a wheel-to-wheel series, not just time trial stuff. The amount of development that has gone into this and will continue to go into this will far exceed either the 86 and the S2000. And that's where all this engineering comes to play. If you have to have that weekend car, this thing is amazing.
So Mark, we're in the 86, and as some of our viewers know, this is the car that started it all for you and I.
It did, actually. It started this whole journey of car videos. My passion for driving, my passion for being disappointed in cars and thinking I could somehow make them better, failed miserably, but here we are in the final evolution of this generation 86.
Yeah, and it's come a long way, and as we talked about in our prior video, this is the maximizing this car. It is no longer a slidey, oversteery car. It's all about grip now. They fixed the brakes. They attempted and failed to fix the engine sound with this TRD exhaust. But for what it is, I think it's a great compromise versus the S2000 and the Miata. Because at the end of the day, this is one of the few cars, or really the only car in this test, that you could actually drive every single day and use as a daily driver.
100%. It's the only car that you could buy for real and then take it and use it 365 days a year with the right tires in pretty much any climate. You still have space, you still have a back seat. If you had to have a car seat, you could put it back there. You have a trunk that you could haul tires in. So that's something that, as much as this might have some deficiencies compared to the other two cars, it makes up for it in the fact that it's just affordable and it still has all the good dynamics somewhere in between both the Miata and the S2000.
And it's still new enough and old enough in both categories, because you can get a 2013 that you could either get a warranty or get a used one for very cheap.
Yes.
So it does have that pro, and it's the most rigid and it has the best aero out of the other two as well. However, once we get into the dynamics of driving, this is where this car starts to fall apart a little bit, sadly. And I guess you want to start with your biggest deficiency with this car, Mark?
So the biggest deficiency is the engine. You definitely feel it's strained. It doesn't like to rev. It doesn't feel free to rev like the Miata and the S2000.
It will go to 7,500 RPM, but
it just doesn't feel good. It doesn't sound good. But here's the thing. It feels way more stable than the Miata, stock versus stock, even the Club. It doesn't wallow around. It doesn't take forever to set. It's more like the S2000 in terms of some of the body control. But where it loses out to the S2000 is it does not want to trail brake. The ABS system is still far too aggressive here when you get deep into the pedal. You have a nice firm pedal, but when you start to use it, it's just This car does not turn in as well as the Miata and the
Like
S2000.
right there.
It wants to wash out more, and now that they've sorted out the suspension in terms of grip, you have grip, you have the dynamics, you have all the things that are fixed to make this more balanced, but the finer details of making this a driver's car are not here as much as the Miata and S2000.
I don't disagree with you. Its strengths dynamically are its gearbox, pedal box, and steering. I do think it is probably the best steering in the group, but you're right, sadly, the dynamics don't necessarily match how good the inputs are.
Correct. So that forces you really, even at this level, with everything sorted out with more grip, you still have to go and do certain aftermarket things to get it to turn in better. You need more tire. It's still under tired, even though you don't have crummy all seasons on here. You have real tires, but at 215, there's not a lot of grip and you run out of it. And the worst part about that is you don't have the ability to change any type of serious alignment settings on here that could neutralize being under tired more. So you're kind of hit this wall where the S2000 and the Miata give you more overhead as stock cars.
If you can only have one car, this is the car to buy.
Yeah, absolutely. Final thoughts on the 86, the S2000 and ND2. Big thanks to Amir, who let us borrow his club Miata for the track portion, and of course Autobahn Country Club. If you have a sports car or you love to drive and you're in the Midwest, get a membership there or just go there, because it's the best way to experience a car with all the traffic and nonsense. I really appreciate them working with us to make these videos. Now, on to the results of this. I've owned a lot of sports cars, and some I've spent so much money on that I have to work so much I don't even get to enjoy it. And I've been in both places. Really cool cars, and I keep going back to the vehicles in this test. When there's a level of affordability, simplicity, reliability, when you go out there to enjoy it, there's not this thing in the back of your head that's throbbing like, holy shit, what if I crash this? I can't afford to fix it. I can't afford the consumables. I have to back off. And these cars allow you that middle ground. And you know, I'm not saying 25, 30,000 isn't a lot of money, but it's way less of a headache than driving around an $80,000+ car, and you get almost all of the fun, the great driving dynamics. These are all drivers' cars in their own way. The 86, it lost in the drag race 14 out of 14 times. It's the torque curve, it's the engine. We've talked about this forever. It just does not get off the line well, and it does not pull well on the track. Where it makes up for a lot of its deficiencies is in steering, its neutrality of the chassis. It is completely under-tired by design. There's not enough tire here. So even though there's way more grip to be had or way more balance to be had, you know, with 215 tires, you're just not getting there. So it's always being held back by the car. You can maximize your driving skill, and then you're gonna have to modify it. It's the best usable car if you have to have one car. You can drive it year-round with the back seats, the trunk, all of that. Amazing. But from a performance perspective, there's just too much to be done there in the aftermarket to make it the best car of the bunch. They have updated it for 2021, and you're getting more torque, you're getting more horsepower, naturally aspirated motor, you're getting an oil cooler, you're getting reinforced subframes, and of course, lower center of gravity, manual trans. So it's going to be this car on steroids, so it should bump this to the top of the list. In terms of lap times, it was running almost 2 seconds slower than the ND2 Miata and almost 3 seconds behind the S2000 as stock cars. The ND2 Miata, it's the best car overall. It's just the least usable. It's the funnest on the street because of the torque curve. It annihilated the S2000 on street starts every single time in a drag race. It's got the most torque off the line, and it's going to be the most developed car. It's being used in real motorsports, wheel-to-wheel racing, in a series, a sanctioned series, not just time trial stuff. You get bespoke cars, and that's where all this development has continued to go. The 86 and the S2000 were just kind of like, they needed to add these lightweight, fun driver's cars to their portfolio at a price point. The Miata is Mazda's like heart and soul, and you see it across the entire car. That's what makes it amazing. But there are deficiencies there. I mean, in terms of usable interior space, trunk space, it's just the best second car of the bunch, but it's also in stock form one of the worst of the three in terms of performance on the track. There's way too much body roll. There's just way too much pitch and roll. It's not direct. You have to do weird things to the car, like flicking the steering wheel or stabbing the brakes or just getting it to set and rotate in certain ways that you don't have to do with the other two cars. So you're constantly having to think about, how do I work with the car to get it to set versus the car working with you? And that's why I prefer, in many cases, the FRS, and I much prefer the S2000, which is the best of the three in terms of performance. It just intuitively reacts. It trail brakes without feeling like the ABS system's constantly interfering or wanting to plow the front end off the track. You go deep into the brakes, the back end comes around without you having to turn the wheel all this way. You're basically making these little minute inputs and small corrections all the time and staying ahead of the car. And it feels like it sets. And you have also one of the best naturally aspirated four cylinders ever created in the S2000 and one of the best gearboxes. And we also know it's one of the most reliable platforms. The drivetrain was completely overbuilt here, and it has stood the test of time. It's just Honda has given up on that. And that's why, you know, it costs so much in the aftermarket, or it costs so much to buy it used. And that's why the ND2 Miata becomes kind of that replacement. You know, you can fix the deficiencies I've talked about with the race parts or the aftermarket parts with minimal effort, and you have complete adjustable alignment all the way across the board. If you need the best second sports car here with years, with years of work to come on the chassis, you get an ND2 and you love every second. If you need the usable one, you get the FRS or wait for the new one. And the last part is the S2000. If you're feeling nostalgic like I am and you have a lot of money to spend on a used one or trying to find a good one and you have the patience for that, you're going to love the S2000 probably more than both cars. But each one has their pros and cons, and I'm glad to have this video out for you to kind of explain that not everything is about money, not everything is about horsepower, it's about how a car makes you feel, and each one of these is going to make you feel something. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.